You ever been so broke that even your thoughts feel like they're running up a tab? Like every time you start to think too hard, there's a little voice in your head going, "Hey buddy, you sure you can afford that idea?" That's what being broke does to you. It's not just about not having money, it's about being mentally overdrawn. You start thinking in installments. I'll think about that tomorrow, maybe after payday, maybe after I pay rent and my brain stops charging late fees. When you're broke, every decision feels like an economic summit in your head. You're standing in front of the fridge with 3 items: mustard, baking soda, and regret, and somehow you're calculating interest rates. You start budgeting emotions. Okay, I can afford to feel happy for about 20 minutes today, but then I got a switch to worry 'cause the rent's due. You ever notice how broke people are the best mathematicians on the planet? We can divide $1 12 ways, calculate sales tax in our heads, and predict whether that coupon will still be valid after next Thursday's storm. We could run the economy, we just can't afford to participate in it. And thoughts, man, they start costing real money. You can't just daydream anymore. Daydreaming becomes a luxury sport. You're like, I can't afford to imagine a vacation right now. I still owe last month's imagination bill. You start thinking in practical, budget-friendly thoughts. Not what if I started a business, but what if I found another job where I could steal more napkins? That's where your creativity goes when it's broke. It starts downsizing. See, money problems don't just take your cash, they repossess your peace of mind. You're lying awake at night doing mental arithmetic like you're training for the Olympics of anxiety. If I don't eat for 3 days, that's $12 saved. If I turn the lights off forever, that's another 30. Suddenly, darkness becomes a lifestyle choice. You don't need mood lighting, you've got the electric company cutting you off for free. And you start talking to your thoughts like they're employees you can't afford to pay. All right, ideas, listen up, only the essential ones are staying. Dreams about success, you're fired. Worries about bills, you're promoted to full-time. That's what broke does, it creates this mental inflation where every thought has a cost, and worrying is the only thing you can afford in bulk. Even thinking about food becomes an emotional roller coaster. You ever open a menu and realize your brain automatically starts doing math before your stomach even gets involved? You're not thinking, what looks good? You're thinking, what can I chew the longest so it feels like value? That's broke thinking. You're strategizing bites like a general planning for war. Okay, if I eat slow, chew more, drink extra water, I can make this sandwich last through the evening news. And people love to give advice when you're broke, especially people who have never been broke. Just think positive. Yeah, sure, I'd love to, but positivity requires energy, and right now I'm running on caffeine fumes and existential dread. You can't manifest money when your brain's busy manifesting survival. People say money doesn't buy happiness. No, but it rents peace of mind, and right now, my lease is overdue. You start noticing how expensive thinking gets. You want to remember the good old days, but nostalgia costs emotional interest. You want to plan for the future, but the future has a cover charge. You want to hope, but hope's got a minimum balance requirement. When you're broke, hope starts bouncing like a bad check. And let's talk about broke creativity. Broke people are the most inventive human beings alive. We'll find ways to stretch every resource. We'll reuse, recycle, reinvent. We're the original innovators before Silicon Valley made it fashionable. You want sustainable living? Come to a broke person's kitchen. We've been reusing foil and washing plastic forks since before it was a movement. But here's the funny part: when you're broke, you also become philosophical. You start questioning everything. Why does a loaf of bread cost this much? Why does rent go up when my paycheck goes down? Why do people who already have money get discounts and people who don't have money get fees? It's like the system was designed by someone who thought Monopoly was a documentary. And then there's the guilt. Oh, the guilt of thinking something nice. You ever catch yourself imagining a better life and immediately feel like you're stealing from reality? Like, oh no, I shouldn't think that the universe might charge me extra. You start apologizing to yourself for wanting things. Sorry, brain, I know we can't afford hope this month. Maybe next cycle. But the truth is, and this is the dark little joke of it, all that kind of broke thinking sticks with you even after you crawl out of it, because poverty leaves fingerprints on your thoughts. Even when you've got a little money, you still count it in your head before spending it. You still hesitate before buying something that costs more than $20. You still think, do I really deserve this? That's the mental tax of being broke. The price tag doesn't disappear just because the wallet gets heavier. It just moves into your brain and sets up shop. You learn to think cheap, feel cheap, and dream cheap until you remember that your mind isn't supposed to be for sale. You start realizing that maybe the only free thing left in the world is laughter, and even that feels like a luxury sometimes. But laughter's the one thing broke folks have in abundance, because when you've got nothing left to lose, the absurdity of life becomes your entertainment. You laugh because it's cheaper than therapy, and it works twice as well. So yeah, when you're so broke that even your thoughts cost money, you start realizing how expensive it is just to exist. But that's also where you learn the art of survival, the beauty of stretching nothing into something. You learn how to turn a mental deficit into a creative surplus. You learn that even when the wallet's empty, the mind doesn't have to be, because if every thought costs money, then laughter, gratitude, and imagination are the only things left worth going into debt for. You ever notice how people love to glorify the hustle, rise and grind? They say, like they're advertising a new brand of coffee instead of slow human exhaustion. Everyone's out there hustling like there's a medal waiting at the finish line. But when you're broke, the hustle isn't motivation, it's survival with a dress code. You're not chasing dreams, you're chasing overdue bills. It's not a grind, it's a treadmill, and it's going just fast enough that you can't step off without face planting into your next financial disaster. When you're broke, the hustle doesn't feel like ambition. It feels like debt in motion. You wake up tired, go to work tired, and come home tired, but somehow still too broke to afford rest. You ever been so broke you couldn't even afford to take a day off being broke? That's the kind of broke where your alarm clock doesn't wake you up, guilt does. You lie there thinking, if I don't move, nothing gets paid, and your body says, we can't move, and your wallet says, we couldn't care less. That's the broke man's triangle: no energy, no money, no choice. People act like the hustle is noble. They put it on T-shirts, they post it on walls, work hard, play hard. Yeah, but they never tell you the small print, die tired. Nobody tells you that part. Nobody tells you that the hustle taxes your soul with interest. You're out there trading your hours for nickels, thinking one day it'll add up to freedom, but all it adds up to is more hustle. You ever try to save money when you don't make enough to cover the basics? It's like trying to fill a swimming pool with a leaky spoon. The more you scoop, the wetter you get, and the pool still looks empty. And the advice you get, oh, the advice, you just have to want it bad enough. Yeah, I do. I want it so bad I can taste the plastic on my expired credit card. Wanting doesn't pay the bills. Hustle culture has everybody thinking that exhaustion is a personality trait. People brag about being busy like it's a badge of honor. Oh, I only slept 4 hours last night. Yeah, congratulations, you're slowly becoming a ghost. You want a cookie or a coffin. You ever work 2 jobs and still be broke? That's when you start questioning math itself. Wait a minute, I'm working twice as much. Shouldn't I have twice as much money? But no, somehow you just have twice as much fatigue. You're running on caffeine, stress, and whatever dreams haven't been repossessed yet. You get your paycheck, you look at it, and your first thought is, who's been stealing from me? But then you remember rent, taxes, food, bus fare, and suddenly you realize it's not theft, it's math bullying. And when you're stuck in that grind, time stops feeling real. You don't have days anymore, just shifts. You wake up, you work, you eat, you sleep, and you do it again until you forget which day it is. Monday, Thursday, who cares, it's just another lap on the hamster wheel. And every now and then someone says, take a break, you deserve it. Sure, but you ever notice how expensive rest is? You can't even afford to stop moving. You take one day off and your bills multiply like rabbits in the dark. And the worst part, the hustle makes you think it's your fault. You start believing that if you're broke, it's because you didn't grind hard enough. They've convinced us that poverty is a personality flaw. You could be juggling 3 jobs, skipping meals, and walking to work in shoes held together by faith, and someone will still say, you just need to work harder. Yeah, thanks for the revelation, Socrates. Maybe I'll add a 4th job that pays in exposure. You ever notice the irony? The people who talk the most about hard work usually aren't the ones doing it. They're the ones selling it. Motivational posters, seminars, books all telling broke people to hustle more. It's like selling umbrellas to people standing in a hurricane. Don't worry, just stay positive. Yeah, I'd love to, but positivity doesn't cover late fees, and the hustle steals more than your time. It steals your pride in quiet little ways. You start measuring your worth in hours, not ideas. You start thinking that if you're not constantly producing, you're wasting space. You forget what silence sounds like. You forget what rest feels like. Even your dreams clock in for overtime. You go to sleep thinking about bills and wake up thinking about work. Your brain doesn't even get weekends off. Then one day you realize you're not hustling towards something, you're hustling away from collapse. You're sprinting just to stand still. It's like being trapped on a moving sidewalk that only goes backward. You move and move, but the ground keeps sliding under you, and the sign at the end still says keep going. But the funny part, and there's always a funny part, is that when you're broke long enough, you start finding loopholes in the hustle. You learn shortcuts, mental hacks, survival tricks. You find joy in moments that don't cost anything. You start laughing at the absurdity of it all, because laughter's the only currency that never loses value. You start realizing that the real hustle isn't working harder, it's staying human while you're doing it. You see those people who brag about never sleeping, never resting, always grinding. They look like their souls went on strike. The eyes are open, but nobody's home. You don't want to be that. You want to remember why you're moving in the first place. Because hustle without purpose is just noise, loud, exhausting, expensive noise. There's a difference between ambition and desperation. Ambition builds, desperation scrambles. And most of us are just scrambling to survive in a world that keeps raising prices and lowering patience. We're not lazy, we're tired, and that's not the same thing. You can't pour energy from an empty body, no matter how many motivational quotes you tattoo on your soul. Sometimes the bravest thing a broke person can do is stop. Just stop for a second and breathe, even if that breath feels like rebellion, because every time you pause, you're telling the world, I'm not a machine. The hustle might charge interest, but your humanity is non-refundable. So yeah, when you're broke, the hustle isn't free, it charges you interest, late fees, and maybe even your sanity. But in that grind, you also learn what kind of strength you really have. Not the kind they sell on posters, the kind that comes from showing up again and again, even when everything in you wants to lie down and disappear. Because the real victory isn't in outworking everyone, it's in outlasting the noise long enough to remember who you are. You ever notice how when you're broke long enough, you start finding wealth in the weirdest places? I'm not talking about under the couch cushions, although, let's be honest, that's a solid savings account right there. I mean the kind of wealth that doesn't show up on a bank statement. The stuff that lives in laughs, moments, and the sheer stubbornness of surviving another day without losing your mind. Because after you've been broke long enough, you start realizing that maybe the richest people aren't the ones with money, they're the ones who can still laugh while the world's trying to repo their joy. When you're broke, you learn creativity on a PhD level. You start treating every day like a game show. How much can I do with how little? You turn leftovers into masterpieces. You learn how to stretch a meal, a shirt, a smile. You become a magician with a grocery list, making beans and rice feel like fine dining if you light the right candle and squint a little. Broke folks can take $1 and turn it into an afternoon, a memory, a comedy sketch. You start measuring wealth in laughter per minute instead of dollars per hour. And that's the funny thing, the less you have, the more you see. When you don't have distractions, you start noticing life's tiny luxuries. Like a day when nothing breaks, a morning when the bus actually shows up on time, or that feeling when your laundry comes out warm and you just stand there like, ah, wealth. You start redefining luxury. It's not champagne, it's peace and quiet. It's opening the fridge and not feeling judged by it. It's having a pair of socks without holes. That's broke joy right there, finding comfort in the micro moments that nobody else notices because they're too busy buying happiness in bulk. And you learn gratitude, real gratitude, the kind that doesn't need a holiday or a motivational quote to feel it. Gratitude that shows up when your friend shows up with a cup of coffee you didn't have to buy. Gratitude when your paycheck hits, even if it's gone 15 minutes later. You celebrate it like a festival. Look, I'm rich for 7 minutes. Drinks on me, tap water for everyone. But it's not just about laughter and gratitude, it's about connection. When you're broke, you realize how rich you are in people. You find your tribe, the ones who understand the language of struggle. They don't judge you for reusing paper towels. They hand you theirs. You learn to barter emotions. You bring the stories, I'll bring the snacks, and together we'll pretend we're not broke. That's community, that's wealth. You ever notice how broke people are the funniest? Because we have to be. Humor becomes our currency. It's how we make sense of the nonsense. You laugh not because life's easy, but because it's ridiculous. Like, really, universe, I lost my job and the toaster. Great guess, I'll make cold bread and call it sushi. You reach a point where the only thing you can afford to do is laugh, and thank God it's free. Humor turns into a survival tool, the last thing they can't tax or repossess. And then there's love. You ever fall in love while broke? That's when you find out what love's really made of. Because broke love doesn't hide behind fancy dates or shiny gifts. Broke love is two people sharing a single plate of fries, splitting a drink, and still feeling like royalty. It's the most honest kind of love there is, the we don't need much, just each other and maybe a working heater kind. You start realizing that love doesn't cost, ego does. Real love, the broke kind, it thrives on shared laughter, long walks, and dreams that cost nothing to imagine. And speaking of dreams, when you're broke, your dreams get bold. Not fancy, but bold. Because when you've got nothing to lose, imagination is your richest asset. You sit there on the bus or at the laundromat, staring into space, planning your empire in your head. You can't afford blueprints, so you build it in your imagination. You tell yourself, one day I'm gonna make it, and for those few seconds you feel wealthy as hell. Broke dreams are free. Ain't no limits, no budget, just raw ambition wrapped in sarcasm and hope. It's funny how money tries to buy happiness, but happiness keeps slipping through the cracks to hang out with the broke folks. Happiness doesn't care about your wallet. It cares about your ability to find light in the dark. You see rich people always chasing happiness, like it's something they can order in bulk. Meanwhile, broke folks are finding it in the most unexpected places: a shared meal, a good joke, a warm breeze that doesn't cost anything. And there's something else when you've been broke. You learn humility. You stop pretending. You stop competing. You stop measuring your life by what you own and start measuring it by what you can give, even if it's just kindness or time. You become more generous because you know how it feels to have nothing. You stop seeing people as competitors and start seeing them as fellow survivors. There's no room for pride when you're counting coins. There's only room for empathy. You ever see a group of broke friends hang out? It's like a support group run by stand-up comedians. Everyone's broke, but everyone's laughing. You pool your resources. One person's got chips, the other's got a couch, someone's got a good story, and that's enough. No one cares what you're wearing or what you drive. Nobody's pretending. There's a kind of freedom in that, a raw, honest, stripped-down humanity that money can't buy. And when you start to come out of it, when you finally catch a break, get a little ahead, you realize that all those moments of broke laughter, broke love, broke hope were worth more than any paycheck. Because they built you. They taught you how to find light in scarcity, how to create joy from nothing, how to see beauty in the ordinary. You don't forget those lessons. Even when you've got more, you still appreciate less. You still remember the thrill of making something out of nothing, and it keeps you grounded. So yeah, being broke sucks. It's exhausting, it's humiliating, it's a full-time job with no benefits, but it also strips life down to its essentials. It reminds you what actually matters. You stop living for things and start living for moments. You learn that wealth isn't what you have, it's what you can hold on to when everything else is gone. Because when you're so broke that even your thoughts cost money, the richest thing you can ever own is your ability to keep laughing, loving, and dreaming anyway.